Hi, my name is Simon and I'm the creator of Spacewalk, a real-time analysis platform for games and similar applications. In this video we take a look at a number of different games from small to big, spanning various genres, to show you what insights you can get and what you can learn from using Spacewalk and more specifically the information flow plugin in a playtesting setting. Before we start out, I will give you a brief overview over the information flow plugin to show you where to look at in the following videos and what data you're actually going to see. The videos have been recorded with the OBS software and it is a merge of various different video streams to form the whole picture. In the top left corner you can see the actual video feed from the game. In the bottom left corner you can see a direct visualization of the user's input, what buttons they pressed, the position of the analog sticks and so on. And right next to it you see a video feed from the tester playing the game. On the right hand side of the screen you can see the information flow plugin. The most interesting part of the plugin is the first graph. This graph shows the information flow. The information flow is the information content that flows from the player through the controller into the game. What it actually measures is the interactivity between the player and the game. We used information theory and a stochastic model to actually compute the information content of the user input. The information content of an event, such as a button press or more general user interaction, correlates with the unlikeliness of that event. As a brief example, if the user does something that is very unexpected, this event will result in a very high information content. On the other hand, if the user does something that is very expected or predictable, then this event will have a very low information content. If we sample this information content throughout the whole game and then put the results into a graph, we get what we have here as the information flow graph. In this graph, you can now see the different levels of interaction, more interaction, less interaction, patterns emerging in the interaction, and information content. The first example here is from the puzzle platformer Braid. In this simple level, as well as in the following, you can see that the interaction appears to be rather discrete. You see little spikes in the information flow that are then followed by short intervals of very little interaction. In the slightly more complex puzzle here, the interaction pattern seems to be driven by a trial and error approach of the player. The player makes a plan, executes it, observes the results, and stops to evaluate the result and the new situation afterwards. The next game we look at is Super Mead. In this fast-paced game, the player tries to get to the end of a level, overcoming various deadly obstacles. What we can see here is that the information flow gradually decreases with the time the player spends on a certain level. The player's interactions become fewer and more predictable over time, almost as if the player was optimizing their path through the level more and more with every run. This particular level is somewhat divided into two easier parts that are connected by a challenging segment. What we see in the data is a rise in information content once the player reaches that critical section. Their interaction becomes less predictable and it seems a bit more hectic. Once the player is about to master a level, we can see that the information bandwidth required is actually quite low. It's more about good flow and perfect timing to get every jump right to make it to the end. Now we're moving on to a different genre and take a look at Proteus, an indie first-person exploration game. The player has no explicit goals and can roam the island freely. What we see here is that the interaction flow is quite low most of the time and only rises if the player sees something interesting or is adjusting their path. In this section here, the player moves towards the swirling sparks in front of them, only to be briefly sidetracked by a curious animal jumping in their path. What we see in the data is a sharp rise in the information flow that then goes back to the previous pattern once the player continues to move towards the original goal. Another game that nicely illustrates action and interaction patterns is Portal 2. Here the player is confronted with the puzzle to find and activate the exit of the room. In this particular room, the laser beam was introduced as a new game element. In the data, as well as on screen, we see what was described as action breakdowns in literature. The player forges an initial plan and starts to execute it up to the point where they have to stop, reorient themselves and alter the plan. This breakdown is what we can see in the data as moments of non-interaction immediately followed by moments of high interaction. Moving along in terms of genres, we're now coming to Secrets of Raetikon, an independent 2D flying exploration and adventure game. The game combines different modes of interaction, and the first one we see here is free flying and soaring. What we see in the data is that the interaction is reduced to smaller and more predictable movements and adjustments leading to a lower information flow bandwidth. In this section, the player interacts with this giant and occult machine. It is seemingly a back and forth of the player's action and the resulting reaction of the machine that we can also observe in the data. The following section here requires a bit more skill from the player. This narrow corridor has dangerous thorns on either side, and in the data we can see that this requires a lot more information bandwidth and interaction from the player than the previous section. Combat in this game is also a situation that requires high levels of interaction and is not so easily predictable with the current Markov chain-based stochastic model, leading to a higher information flow. We're now coming to Spec Ops: The Line, a AAA first-person shooter released in 2012. In this section, you see the player slowly walking down a corridor and then attacking the enemies in the game. When you take a look at the interaction patterns in the data, you can see that more active and passive phases are alternating each other. You can also see that the patterns are changing over the course of the encounter, partly influenced by the pace of the enemies attacking, but also due to the player looking around and reorienting themselves in the scene. The last two examples are from two racing games, first of which is Drift Stage, an 80s-inspired arcade racing game that is currently in development. With racing games, you see that the information flow is relatively constant over the whole play session. It is only in very simple sections or in straights where the interaction decreases a bit. The last game we take a look at in this video is Beyond 35,000. It is an independently developed crossover between arcade racing and flying. The player can freely steer the racing vehicle in all directions, adding another dimension of control to the game. What we thus see in the data is that the information bandwidth is pretty much constant over the whole race. Even in straight sections, the player has to maintain a certain height above the ground, which requires more interaction than just going straight and fast. In summary, this video showed different examples of how you could use Spacewalk and the Information Flow plugin to analyze games, what patterns you might see, and the range of possible interpretations they could have. Overall, this is quite a new approach, and over time we will learn new things about it, learn to better understand the data, and see if it is actually a worthwhile approach to video game analysis. Spacewalk and all the plugins I created are open sourced under the MIT license, and I invite everybody to tinker with it, adjust it to your needs, or maybe to create plugins for your own workflow. Also feel free to contact me anytime with questions or comments about the project.